Okay, welcome everybody to Essentials of Marketing, a marketing strategy planning approach, Chapter 6, Business and Organizational Customers and Their Buying Behavior. Up until this point, we've been speaking about business to consumer, otherwise known as B2C. This chapter will talk about what I teach as an entire course called B2B, business to business, with respect to buying behavior on an organizational level. Now you have to understand something. When you're an employee of a company, outside of the fact that you're trying to, of course, make the company better, make them profitable, and you have all your altruistic reasons, and I don't doubt your altruism, but to tell me that you don't have any personal skin in the game, if you tell me that, then I will, and if you think I believe that, then I'll sell you beachfront property in Arkansas. Okay? People have their own personal reasons why they do things in a business. And I'll cue you into the little secret. It's because they want to look good. And how do you look good in an organization? If you save the organization money. So let's say you're a purchaser, you're somebody that buys for the organization, the best way to look good is to, of course, save money, get very, very good contracts, and as such, people will behave a certain way, much differently than somebody who's buying a pair of jeans or a pair of shoes. Many times people will buy things on impulse. If you're an organizational purchaser, if you buy on impulse, I don't want you working for me. It means you're not doing things in my best interest. But an organizational purchaser is someone that's supposed to be looking out for the benefit, for the best, for the best interests of the organization that she or he works for. We move on to slide 2. These are the points that we're going to try to cover tonight. Is name and give examples of the different types of business and organizational buyers. Describe how organizational and business markets differ from consumer markets. Describe each step in the model of organizational/business buying. Explain the different types of buying processes. In addition, we're going to try to understand the different types of buyer-seller relationships and their benefits and limitations. Know about the number and distribution of manufacturers and why they are an important customer group to contend with. Know how buying by service firms, retailers, wholesalers, and governments is similar to and different from buying by manufacturers, and understand important new terms. With that said, we go to a very, very busy looking slide, and as I usually point my students, I like to look at the bottom over here. Okay? The bottom, a little bit of a summary overview. Individual people make purchases to satisfy their needs, but so do organizations. The organizational market is actually bigger than the final consumer market, at least in terms of the number of purchases made. Thus, it presents significant opportunities for marketers. And of course, dealing with things like military contracts, things are super, super expensive. I forgot if it's the B-2 or the B-1 bomber. Maybe it's the B-2 bomber. Costs something like $1 billion a piece. So you can imagine the amount of care that's supposed to go into a project like that, purchasing project like that, buying something that costs $8 billion would it be. Key issues, and believe me, if you're flying that plane, don't bring it back with any damage. Because if you think your parents are mad at you if you scratch the car, can you imagine the guy in charge of the air base and the B-1 bomber comes in with a busted wing or some sort of messed up hydraulics? It's a lot of money. Better make sure you call Geico real quick. Key issues. The organizational consumer market is often referred to as the industrial market or the B2B market, otherwise known as business to business. So what type of consumers are involved? Business and organizational customers buy for resale or to produce other goods and services. There are 4 main categories of these customers. Producers of goods and services, manufacturers, farmers, real estate developers, etc. Intermediaries, wholesalers and retailers. Government units at the federal, state, and local levels, as well as foreign governments, they all get involved in purchasing. And nonprofit organizations, including both national and local organizations. So those are the people we're talking about over here. We now move on to the next slide. The next slide, we're talking about specific aspects of organizational customers are considered in this particular chapter. As in chapter 5, we spoke about the final consumer and their buying behavior. Of course, here we talk about the business and organizational customer and their buying behaviors. So within that, we talk about business and organizational markets and customers are different. Fewer or larger buyers, economic needs, behavioral needs. There are ethical issues, of course, kickbacks and things of that nature. Purchasing managers that have to be dealt with, understood. Multiple buying influences. When a company buys something, there are many hands that touch that. For example, if let's say you're a large organization, you have to buy a new copy machine. There'll be a lot of people making that decision, all the way down from the mailroom person who's operating that machine. If the purchasing department is really good at what they do, they'll definitely speak to them because they're going to be using it more than anyone else. And of course, the finance people and all the other people that, possibly IT, to be able to integrate it into their servers. There'll be a lot of touch points. We'll talk about a model of organizational buying, business buying, defining the problem. The problem meaning what are they have a problem, they have to purchase something. The reason they're purchasing something is to solve a problem. I don't mean a problem like a bad thing. Problem meaning there's something that needs to be done, taken care of. It's a buying process, and of course there's managing buyer-seller relationships. And of course, characteristics of types of organizational customers, manufacturers, producers of services, retailers, and of course, wholesalers, and of course, government units. Okay, we move on now. We skip the next two slides because they are some sort of mini videos, and of course I can't show them while I'm taping for YouTube. Let's talk about the differences between organizational customers and final customers. Organizational customers, again, I'll be looking at the bottom of the slide. Those are the teacher notes. The slides that I provide you are my own slides that I get as a professor. I'm not sure what the student has access to, but these are the best slides available, most robust, with the most information at hand. So again, just for a summary overview, organizational customers and their buying behaviors are different from the final consumer and their buying behavior. These differences play a vital role for marketing strategy planning. Please stop me if you have any questions. Don't feel bad. Don't feel like you're ruining my video because I'm taping. This class is not just for the people out there on the internet reviewing this class. It's for you guys as well. So feel free to stop me if you're not sure of something. Key issues: fewer in number but larger in dollars purchased. Believe me, Boeing. There are less buyers like Boeing. There are less companies like Boeing, but what they purchase costs a lot of money. It's not like they could walk into Home Depot and say, "Hey, where's the avionics? Where's the avionics section where I could buy GPSs and all kinds of other parts that go into the computers of an airplane?" They're not going to be able to buy wings somewhere. They can't just walk in and get a jet engine to pick up the seats that go into a plane. These are special things. These are bought from special suppliers. Key issues: fewer in number but large in dollars purchased. While there are fewer business customers, meaning there are less customers buying airplanes than there are people buying jeans, individually each typically makes much larger purchases than the average consumer. The average consumer, I don't know, will spend, let's say, $10,000 in stuff throughout the year, $20,000, $50,000. That's not the case when you're talking about business purchases. This makes it worthwhile to invest more resources into each customer because each customer is spending a lot of money. Money in the millions or hundreds of millions, depending on what they're buying. Economic needs are primary. Organizations typically focus on economic factors, but a marketing manager should not forget that behavioral needs still matter. Buyers want security. They want to look good, as I mentioned, to their colleagues at work. And of course, they want to avoid risk. You don't want it on your shoulders. For example, let's say you're in charge of construction for a state. You build all the state bridges and tunnels, and you wanted to save money, so you bought cheap metal or cheap steel from wherever. I don't want to offend anybody and quote the name of a country that people are going to say, "Hey, I'm being anti-X, Y, and Z." So we'll just leave this very, very open. You buy something from a country, that country sold you subpar materials, and it could be any country. Okay? Now, 2 years after you feel good, you're in your job, all of a sudden there's a massive bridge collapse. 100 people, God forbid, die. They fall 500 feet into the ocean or to the lake, wherever the bridge is situated. Of course, there's an investigation. They find out the steel used to reinforce the cement, right, the cinder blocks and the concrete, was garbage, subpar. And by the way, this happened actually. I don't remember which state. It was Minnesota, where this happened, and of course, people died and got hurt in the process. So, of course, as a purchaser, you're going to look terrible. You're going to look like you're inept. Ethical conflicts may arise. Organizational buyers must be careful that their personal interests don't conflict with the company's outcomes. For example, some companies have policies to prevent buyers from accepting gifts, or fear that the gift might make the buyer less objective when choosing supplier. Now, I will say this: there's certain things that are customary, and but a lot of companies are very, very strict about things. Like, for example, I remember when I worked for the city of New York for a short while, we were told that if a vendor comes over to you and, let's say, sends you a fruit platter or a chocolate platter or any platter, you cannot accept it for yourself. You must put it out in the coffee room, the break room, and announce to everyone that, hey, we got something from XYZ Corporation. Here's a fruit platter. Everyone enjoy. So this way, it's not perceived as you getting it for yourself and putting it in your pocket, so to speak, and taking it with you. But there are other things that are customary, and I'll be honest with you, I've seen it in my industry as well, where physicians, for example, are given basketball tickets, front row, Calvin Klein. If you go to the anybody been to the Barclays Center here? So there's something called the Calvin Klein section of all the foods, all the buffet food, fantastic foods over there, kosher, non-kosher, whatever. And of course, you sit up front, you can watch the game right up front. So of course, there are perks to being a doctor. There are perks to being a high-level executive. You get certain things, and it's not necessarily a bribe. But again, it's kind of a gray area of where it stands. Purchasing managers are specialists. Today's purchasing managers are usually very well-trained professionals, very knowledgeable in all the laws and regulations of purchasing, that want to solve problems with suppliers. They want to figure out better ways of solving their own problems. Buying procedures are often standardized. I remember when I worked for the city, we had a preferred vendor list, and you had a choice of choosing from those vendors, and if it was a certain dollar amount, then it would have to be bidded. It would have to be a bidding process. It would be bidded out, and of course the best bid would win. Buying procedures are often standardized to make buying more efficient. Many firms have specific procedures that can be followed. As I mentioned, many buying centers have multiple people influencing the decision. I gave that example of the copy machine before. While this is not unknown in the consumer behavior world, meaning for B2C, because listen, everybody knows that your mother has a lot to say when it comes to buying a car, for example, and rightfully so. Because if she's going to be picking you up from school and picking up the kids from school, she needs certain things. And we see this in commercials, for example, and many of these commercials for like minivans appeal to women, knowing full and well that a great majority of the people buying minivans are not going to be guys just for themselves. If you're a single guy, the only reason you would buy a minivan is if you're transporting people, right? Or if you deliver stuff, but you would never buy a minivan for yourself. So when a woman buys a minivan, one of the concerns that she has is, I'm going shopping. I have both my hands full of, bags holding groceries. I have to be able to open the lift gate. So I forgot which car had this feature where you take your foot and you wave it underneath the car, and then boom, it activates the lift gate in the back to open up. So you don't have to put your stuff down on the wet floor, fumble for your keys and whatnot. Also, the ability to open the car easily, child-proof locks, and things of that nature. So, of course, there are multiple buying influences in your B2C market as well. It's more common in business and organizational buying to have more than your usual one or two people. It also has a major influence on marketing strategy planning. So let's take a closer look at multiple buying influences. Okay. Here's an example of BASF. They're a company that I think they make, if I'm not mistaken, they used to make like hard drives and stuff like that. Am I correct on that? BASF, let me see what they make. I don't remember. Let me just take a look here in Google, if they're still around. Oh, they make all kinds of chemicals and stuff, plastics. Okay, so they're a plastics chemicals company. Okay, so in this slide, basically talking about multiple buying influences means that several people, perhaps even top management, play a part in making a purchase decision. BASF plastics can be used in automobile parts, replacing heavy metal parts. The lower weight can increase fuel efficiency. So BASF works well with, let's say, Ford or with GM to create a lighter car. They can then market it as that, together with BASF, we've been able to engineer a lighter car and of course have better fuel efficiency, save the environment, etc., etc. BASF personnel work with purchasing managers, product managers, and design engineers and automakers to determine where plastic parts offer the greatest benefit to the end user and where it won't make a difference. Obviously, can't use plastic everywhere. You can only use them in areas where it's feasible. Move on to the next slide. Again, the summary overview of that slide is organizations differ from individual consumers in their buying behavior. Key issues: multiple buying influences. The collection of these influences is what we call a buying center, and it's much more elaborate than in your B2C, your business to consumer. There are buyers, the purchasing managers who are responsible for working with suppliers and arranging for the terms of sales and negotiation of contractors. But again, they're the buyers, but you have the users. Users are the people who will actually use the product, possibly production workers or support staff. If you're talking about the military, you're talking about buying fighter jets, of course the users are the pilots, and pilots are definitely involved in the design of fighter planes. They will tell, especially like the high level ones, the ones that have a lot of experience, will tell the manufacturer, hey listen, if you're going to be improving the F-15, well this is what we need. We need better, and if anybody, I'm a military geek. I love military, if you will. One of the things that's really cool about these fifth generation fighter jets is that the actual cockpit has built-in like visuals. You can actually see things in the cockpit itself. The aiming system for the guns or for the missiles is connected to the helmet of the pilot, which is really, really cool. You just look this way and you can shoot at the target just with your head, which is pretty neat. You're talking about virtual reality. That's about as neat as you can get. Also, we have influencers. These are people whose expertise is used to help determine which products are needed. Influencers are often technical people who help write specifications. Of course, gatekeepers. These are the people that prevent the nudgy salesman from coming in. This is your secretary in the front preventing the nudgy pharmaceutical person from coming in and driving you crazy. Gatekeepers are people in key positions in the organization who control the flow of information. Gatekeepers include receptionists, secretaries, researchers, and of course other individuals. Okay, we now skip the next two slides. They're question slides, so we don't do that in class. We look at Exhibit 6.4, a model of organizational buying. Step 1, defining the problem, meaning the thing that you're solving. For example, you're the Air Force, and your problem is you need a 5th generation fighter jet that is virtually invisible to radar. You need something that can go Mach 2.2. I'm just throwing out specifications. You need something that can carry both conventional weapons and smart weapons, or nuclear weapons. You need something that can be used in all weather. And just to kind of tell you where the military is going, the military is trying to create a smaller, leaner military. In that, if you know anything about World War II had like the greatest amount of different airplanes for different roles. You had reconnaissance airplanes, you had bombers, fighter bombers, dive bombers, intercept, a million different things. The Air Force of 2021 wants to be nimble, wants to have one aircraft that can serve multiple roles, obviously to bring down the cost, and of course make things more efficient. Step 2 is in the buying process: establish buying process, gather information, solicit bids, send out RFPs, request for proposals, and of course select the supplier that's needed. And step 3, managing the buyer-seller relationship, structure the relationship, monitor supplier performance. If they're slipping, talk to them. All right, we move on. Any questions thus far, gentlemen? Okay, we move on to slide number 14. Define the problem. From recognizing problems to describing the needs. Specifications describe the product. So if you send out a request for proposal, the RFP will have specs. So for example, using the Air Force as an example, they will send out specifications to Boeing and to Northrop and telling them what they need. And of course, we want to make sure that everything has quality certification, ISO 9000, 9001. These are all seals of approval for quality. Now, we move on. Actually, let's just look at the key issues on the bottom. The basic needs of organizations is to satisfy their customers and clients. Key issues from recognizing problems, to describing needs. Problems that crop up in the organization should be narrowed down to specific needs. Specifications describe the product. Organizational buyers may buy on the basis of a set of purchasing specifications, a written description of what the firm wants to buy. Purchase specifications for services are detailed because services are less standardized and are not performed until after they are purchased. Purchasing specifications for services are detailed because services are less standardized and are not performed until they're purchased. Customers may expect quality certification. As I mentioned, ISO 9000 is an example of that. Move on to the next slide. Step 2 is the decision-making process. Establish the process. How are you going to do it? Gather the information that you need to make a informed decision, and of course, solicit bids and select the suppliers based on reputation, price, and of course, checking them out, making sure that they're legit. Key issues. This starts with establishing the process, gathering information, and finally soliciting bids, and of course selecting the supplier. That process results in establishing the buyer process for the future, so you don't have to necessarily go through the whole rigmarole all over again. You have pre-established ways of doing things, procedures, and it makes things a lot easier. Let's take a closer look at the process. If you look at slide 16, it's a little bit confusing, but let's look at the 3 different types of purchasing. You have new task buying. Occurs when a customer organization has a new need and wants a great deal of information. Obviously, if you're purchasing your first home, your first car, your first laptop, even a smartphone. Just asking you gentlemen, how many of you spent some serious time thinking about which smartphone you were going to get? Anybody here spend time here? The first time, I'm not talking about each time. The first time you got a smartphone, did you make any, you didn't look into it at all? Okay. What about you, Aaron? You're very quiet. Did you look into your smartphone purchase? The first time you bought a smartphone? Okay, tell us, Aaron. Tell us about your experience. Okay, XS Max. Okay. Yeah, Galaxy. You need to have 3 degrees from MIT. I know. Easy to use. Now, you're talking about, I grew up with Samsung. I've also had Apple products, but I like Samsung. I'm actually thinking of jumping ship for my next phone. And the reason is, you'll never believe it, the camera. I went to a Mets game last week, and I had J.D. Davis there, and I wanted to take a selfie with him, which I did, and it came out very fuzzy. I don't like the Samsung cameras. As much as they get better and better and better, that's one of my pain points. I'm a big camera video kind of guy as I shoot videos, and I need something that's very, very clear. And I'm quite frankly very disappointed with Samsung's video quality. Yeah, it's not so great. It really, really bothers me. So I'm thinking of jumping ship. My kids are shocked because they know that I'm Mr. Samsung, but my reason for not liking Apple is because you have to have a special Apple account. There's just too many politics going on. It's not just a matter of, okay, you have a Gmail account, sign in, you're in. Yeah, you have to create a whole Apple ID. It's a bit of a painful process, but I guess once you get past it, everything else is pretty easy. But anyway, so a new task. Really? Okay. Okay, so forget about calling Apple. I will call Aaron Gunter. You will be called. That's right. You just took the words out of my mouth. That's funny. All right. That's okay. I could probably do a better job. Not right now. I'm taping. After class. All right. Setting product specifications, evaluating sources of supply, and of course establishing an order routine to follow in the future. So you're building the process. You're creating the building blocks over here. Straight rebuy is a routine repurchase that uses existing suppliers to fill a standard order. In other words, and uses as a simple example, where to get your office supplies. You work in a big organization and they tell you, here, we have an account at WB Mason, we have an account in Office Max, we have an account wherever we have an account, and then based on that, you're going to purchase things. You don't have to think twice about where you're going to purchase it. Then, of course, you have a modified rebuy, which is something in between the straight rebuy and the new task buying process, which is some review of the buying process is done, but not as much as in a new task buy. Possibly every 2 or 3 years, you just look things over because things change. Now we move on. Any questions on what we just did? Anybody? Okay, we move on to the next slide. Again, the slide is a little bit confusing, so we're gonna talk about the bottom over here. So a new task buy starts with a user who becomes aware of a need and begins researching solutions. This exhibit lists the sources available for the business buyers. Even through a wide variety of information sources are available, business buyers will use the source they trust. To build trust, a marketer must make sure its information is reliable. Key issues: one source of information comes from the marketing firm. This includes personal information that comes from talking to selling firm's personnel. There's no better person to talk than the people inside. In addition, the firm produces information that appears in the print form on paper or online. There's also something called the white papers. White papers are literature that is printed about or available to people in that industry. And of course, buyers will also turn to sources of information outside the direct control of the seller. These can be personal sources or impersonal sources. And of course, the internet, with all of its bloggage and all of its information out there, there's tons of stuff you could figure out. So let's move on. New task buying requires search engines, websites, online communities, and of course, competitive bids. Search engines is the first step. That's your first line of defense to kind of weed out your information and filter it down. Buyers want sites with useful content, easily found. Buyers share experiences in online communities. Buyers ask for competitive bids to compare offerings. After buyers in B2B markets identify potential suppliers, you might ask them to submit a competitive bid in terms of a sale offered by the supplier in response to the purchase specifications posted by a buyer. Buyers make important decisions about how to deal with one or more suppliers. A buyer might want to rely on competition among all available vendors to get the best price on each and every order it places. Many firms use vendor analysis, a formal rating of suppliers on all relevant areas of performance. Many times you can just get that information online. But again, it's always better when you do it yourself because it's personal and it's coming from your own information. The goal is to lower the total costs associated with the purchase, and that definitely goes into the amount of time spent on personnel looking for answers. A buyer might just routinely buy from one vendor with whom it already has a good relationship and stick with them, even though the prices may not be the lowest, but they know that they're reliable. Like for example, the people I buy all of my office stuff from, definitely not the cheapest, but I know I put in an order, it's there the next day, no questions asked. The price is decent, customer service is wonderful. The girls that pick up the phone are amazing, really nice women, and they are very knowledgeable. I've never asked one of them, hey, what's this? And they wouldn't say, oh, I have no idea. That never happens. They always have the answers at their fingertips. So these women are highly, highly trained, and of course make their organization look fantastic. And of course they always answer the emails. Very, very professional. I like them very much. Step 3, managing buyer-seller relationships in business markets. Close relationships may produce mutual benefits, mutual trust, long-term outlook, shared tasks at lower total costs. And of course, relationships may not make sense sometimes because it reduces your flexibility. You're putting in all your resources into one or two companies. It prevents you from branching out. Some purchases are too small or infrequent, not worth your while. And some purchases require much special attention, which you don't have time. And of course, it's just not worth your while. All right, let's move on to the next slide. This talks about relationships of many dimensions. Now, the slide itself is extremely confusing, but you know that you need operational linkage between buyer and seller, and information sharing, operational linkages, cooperation, legal bonds, and of course, relationship-specific adaptations. Meaning, each time you transact business, there are certain adaptations or changes that need to be made to the relationship. So let's look at the bottom here. There are several key dimensions that characterize a close working relationship between organizational buyers and sellers. Key issues, problems are joint responsibilities when buyers and sellers cooperate. So when there's an issue, the buyer and the seller try to help each other out. Buyer and seller work together to achieve both mutual and individual objectives. Both sides are involved in problem resolutions. You don't say, hey, it's not my problem, I don't want to hear about it, just get me the goods. There is definitely an interaction between the two sides. Both the supplier and the buyer benefit. They can share information. Types of shared information may include the exchange of proprietary cost data, meaning how much things cost, that they share it with each other. Discussions of demand forecasts, which are important because the buyers have to tell the companies they're buying from what they think they're going to be needing for the next year. And of course, that'll help them produce the products. And joint work on new product designs. Of course, using your research and development team together with your manufacturers to come up with great ideas and great designs. Updated information sharing. Less duplication of basic information, of course, saves time. And reduced uncertainty about the future, better planning, which leads to better decisions. When you have trust in your supplier, and supplier has trust in the customer, that they're looking out for each other's best interests, it creates a much better, much less stressful business environment. We move on to, skip a bunch of slides, these are like pictorial slides. Dynamics of buyer-seller relationships. Powerful customers may control the relationship, and you'll have to pander to them because they're just so big. Buyers may use several sources to spread risks. So you're a buyer and you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. You'll have several suppliers of product or service that you can count on in case of emergency. And buying varies by the customer type. And we move on. Also, manufacturers are important customers. There are not many big ones. Customers many times manufacturers are clustered in geographic areas. For example, Pittsburgh. You ever heard of the Pittsburgh Steelers? You know, the football team. Why are they called the Steelers? Because the steel mill's there. Business data classifies industries, and of course, the North American Industrial Classification Code, special codes that help identify which industry you're in, and of course, helps you gather important data. Move on to the next slide. Shows you how the NAIC codes work. They work from the larger numbers down to specific numbers. So if you took, let's say, manufacturing is number 31, you go to the next one, you add a 5, it's apparel, then another 2, it's cut and sew, then it's women's and girls' clothing, and of course blouses. So those are the examples of how things work. So the broadest category is a general industry category. On top, as mentioned, manufacturing, for example, has 2 digits. Adding a digit to the manufacturing code narrows industry definition to apparel, and et cetera, we go down the line until you get to the specific business that you're talking about. Slide 31. Service producers are more geographically dispersed than our manufacturers. In the U.S., the segment of the economy is large and growing fast. You have every state has legal people, small business, library services, housekeeping, car repair. You have that everywhere. So there are about 4.6 million service firms in the U.S., and it's definitely grown. Some of these firms have names that are widely recognized. You know, for example, you have Meineke, widely recognized. I think they do all kinds of car repairs and mufflers, transmissions. Many of the service providers are quite small. On the smaller end, you know, your mom and pop shops. These service firms are also dispersed over a wide geographic area. Because of their small size, many service firms have buying procedures that may not be as formal as in large organizations. Many of these buyers need more help in making their purchases than do purchasing managers in a large company. Small service customers like internet buying, for example. Move on over here. Retailers and wholesalers buy from their customers. There's something called committee buying, which basically assigns the buying decision to a committee that reviews reports submitted by the buyer. And of course, this is a very impersonal process. Computers track inventory, sales, and prices. Buyers watch this computer output closely. Many reorder decisions are made automatically via computer links to suppliers. And of course, reorders are straight rebuys that don't require any great amount of effort. And finally, government market. Government buyers typically use competitive bidding and approve supplier lists and put legal constraints on the latitude of individual buyers to prevent foul play. Key issues: the size and diversity of the government makes it an attractive target. Everybody needs toilet paper. Everybody needs paper clips. Government buyers are restrained by purchasing regulations, and competitive bids may be required. And for routine purchases, a government unit can prepare an approved supplier list, so it makes the purchasing a lot easier. Government publications help marketers to learn what government wants to buy. In dealing with foreign governments, information is less available and there may be significant obstacles that favor a domestic supplier. It is unethical to buy help in dealing with foreign governments. Okay, bribery. Not in some countries. Some countries it's okay to bribe and it's a part of the process. In the U.S., the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, otherwise known as the FCPA, prohibits U.S. firms from paying bribes to foreign officials. Okay, that's the end of the recording. Thank you very much for joining the recording.